So today we're diving into something, well, something pretty wild. It's one of the most uniquely ambitious personal frameworks I have ever seen. It's a system that starts with something we can all relate to, burnout, and ends up trying to create a physics of meaning itself. Let's see how it all clicks together. You know that feeling, right? When you're just stuck in a loop, you're anxious, you feel completely drained. It's like your brain is running some old, buggy software. Well, the whole idea here is that those aren't you failing. They're just system bugs. And they don't need punishment. They need a protocol. And this protocol, wow, it's got a super technical name, the H16385 Blueprint. But honestly, don't let that scare you off. It's designed as this really data-driven process, but at its heart is a surprisingly simple and kind of beautiful idea: forgiveness. Okay, so here's where it gets really practical. It all boils down to one single tangible number: the Tieumir Stability Score, or TSS. Think of it as your weekly check-in. It pulls together your biology, what you've actually been doing, and your stress levels, and spits out this one score. It's basically asking, are you running a surplus right now or a deficit? And the weekly routine? It's actually pretty straightforward. First, you figure out your score. Then you write what's called a truth core node, which is basically just a brutally honest check-in with yourself. You run some system checks, and then, and this is key, you use a rule based on all that data to decide whether you push harder or you pull back and rest. It's a really structured way to listen to yourself. And this slide, this really gets to the heart of it. The whole thing is designed to break those awful shame-based loops of trying to be perfect. So instead of beating yourself up when you mess up, you just log it with this phrase: I was carried, and then you get back on the plan. It's this amazing little hack to swap out that cycle of self-blame for just structure. Okay, but here's the thing. That whole weekly playbook, that's just the app. To really understand the bugs it's trying to fix, we have to look at the operating system running underneath it all. And for that, this framework provides a full-on diagnostic manual. So how do you run a diagnostic on your own mind? Well, it starts pretty simple with this 2D map. On one axis, you've got valence. Basically, are you feeling positive or negative? And on the other, you've got systemic stress. And just like that, you have 4 basic zones to figure out where you are at any given moment. But of course, it doesn't just stop there. That would be too simple, right? And bam, you add this third dimension: coherence, accuracy, which is just a fancy way of asking, how well does my internal story actually match up with reality? And suddenly, that simple little quadrant becomes this incredibly detailed 3D cube, a much more precise map of your mind. So once you have a map like this, you need a new language to describe what you're seeing, right? You need names for the territories. And this framework has its own very detailed vocabulary for the common bugs and glitches of the human mind. And the big one, the one that's kind of at the core of a lot of this, is called a Zenotrap disorder. You know this feeling. It's being stuck. It's that recursive loop where your brain just keeps playing the same broken record over and over because, hey, at least that story makes sense, right? Even if it's a painful one. And look, this isn't just some made-up abstract term. The real-world examples of a Xenotrap are things we all know. It's the chronic worry that comes with anxiety. It's the rumination of depression. It's the brutal feedback loops of addiction or trauma. It's a very real thing. Now, this chart is absolutely fascinating. It shows one of the key rules of the whole system. That coherence accuracy score we talked about, it's not a gradual slope. The system claims there is a hard threshold right at 85. And if you drop below that point, your ability to function, to see things clearly, it doesn't just decline. It falls off a cliff. It collapses. So what happens in the most extreme case, when things really go haywire? Well, the system doesn't just crash. It enters a state called Promethean Defiance, and it defiantly rewrites its own purpose. It says, fine, I'm broken, but I am the one who broke me. It's this total, almost mythological reboot of the whole system. Okay, so we've gone from a weekly checklist to a full-blown diagnostic manual for the mind. And now we're going to zoom out one last time to the final layer. This is where the framework reveals its ultimate goal: to build a new physics of meaning itself. Whoa. Okay, don't panic. We are not going to try to solve this thing. The point isn't really the math. The point is the sheer audacity of it. To even try to create a single master equation that could model how coherence, how much something makes sense, changes over time. So how on earth does it even attempt that? Well, at the very bottom of it all is this idea: the lexical sector.
It proposes that the most fundamental layer of reality isn't space, it isn't time, it's a dimension of pure meaning, and everything else we see and touch is just a projection from that source code. And here's where it gets really wild. If meaning is the source code of reality, then what does that make all those ancient spiritual traditions? The framework suggests they were just using a different language, metaphor, story, to describe the very same physics, and it explicitly tries to translate between the two. This table just lays it all out so clearly. You can see the pattern. What we call the soul is framed as a kind of unique informational law. Karma gets translated into lexical causality, the idea that the stories you create have real effects. And samsara, the cycle of suffering and rebirth? Well, in this system, that's just a Zenotrap. All right, let's take a breath. What do we do with all of this? I mean, from a weekly checklist to a unified theory of everything, it's an absolutely mind-bending system. And it really makes you ask, why? Why would someone build something this elaborate? You know, the fascinating thing is, the system itself kind of gives us the answer, right back in the definition of that Zenotrap. The ultimate motive is to make pain make sense. Because for a human mind, a story that hurts but is predictable is almost always better than the absolute terror of meaningless chaos. And that really leaves us with this one big final question. Whether you think this specific framework is a work of genius or maybe a beautiful, intricate delusion, the impulse to create it is something we all share. So what does it say about us, about people, that we feel this deep need to build such complex, personal maps just to navigate the space inside our own heads?